2021 is ending. Let's look at what we did this year. We played about 29 games, did 50-ish music episodes, probably 52. We did a few ranking episodes, I really like those. We did some movie reviews, and we did a few random podcast subjects. Let's look at what the very first video of the year was. It was Cyberpunk. Finishing off...
It begins.
Cyberpunk. Lena talking to us, telling us when Julia's going to give us a call. I was really into trying to hook up with Julia.
Good place to die.
Just not today.
Didn't quite like the main character's voice, but you know what I miss about this game? It's the ambiance. Not those noises, but just the ambience of the world. When all the sounds weren't colliding with each other in really annoying ways. It's like great music,
Hello?
pretty good acting,
So, got a
a
plan?
lot of things to do.
Damn right I do. Come over to mine tonight. Gonna lay the groundwork with Tom and Roxy. They're
Yeah, I
with
think
us.
Cyberpunk,
Michael.
you know, it's probably a game worth going back to, especially now that they've probably fixed a lot of things.
Would you look at this?
And there were a lot of smaller missions that I found in there that were pretty interesting. And I mean, really, just like, if you were
Is this the
casually
Blue Hotel
going through
or
this
the
game
No
and just
Hotel?
soaking in the whole world,
Gunomat by a government.
and trying to pick and choose which missions are going to be
the
good or
only
not. and,
non-sexual thing in this game.
you know, maybe one you just kind of picked away at each evening.
Why would there be
I
a
think it'd
health
be
thing here?
I think it'd be the
Someone was
best
so
way
high
to
playing
enjoy
that
it.
game. Since
It
I
was
just
a
spent 10 minutes
grand
driving, I
swing.
don't think I'm going to play Game Redrive.
And a bit of a miss, but
Rags. It was. You thought it was most.
it's
like
more or
it was
less, you know,
Rags
it's
to
more
Riches
like it was like a
story.
foul
Chapter
ball.
1, then they suddenly
Doesn't
killed
count,
Jackie and Johnny
but
and
some
best
lucky
friend.
fan caught it and had a good time.
Yes.
Our first top 20 music episode was about office music. This is where, after we had been doing the music show for about a year, we started in 2020. It was a pandemic baby. And this is when we weren't just doing obvious things like the best Mario music, or, God, I hate when people go up like this when they list things. It's so annoying. It makes me want to blow my brains out. Or I could throw myself off a cliff, or I could sit in a car in a garage and just run the engine. So I'm going to stop doing that. But yeah, this is when we started coming up with really interesting themes. And I like this one for January, because January is so boring. You have to do January, but it's not fun. It's like an office job. You got to do it. And there is some enjoyment to be had if you just kind of get into it. And this was a lot of fun. Also, it looks like I was experimenting with my 50 millimeter lens. Actually, it's a 45 millimeter, which is more rare. It's a vintage Nikkor lens from Japan. I guess they call it Nikkor instead of Nikon. That's weird. Horky'll know why. Anyways, it's probably a bit too much face. I like this one a little bit more out. I got a little bit more of a glow. Boy, I look real happy. What am I listening to? Yeah. Turn it up, DJ. Anyways, I love those top 20 music shows. They're a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. Everybody's contributions to them, all the new music that we find. It's a hell of a good time. Then I got into a big phase of CRPGs and indie games. I think I was getting a bit sick of big mainstream titles. Perhaps Cyberpunk contributed to that. And also the idea of GeForce Now, where if you don't have a great and powerful computer like the Great and Powerful Oz, or if your computer is as powerful as the Great and Powerful Oz actually is, then GeForce Now will let your computer pretend to be great and powerful, much like the Great and Powerful Oz. Man, what I loved about Disco Elysium is that you would actually get into these really difficult conversations where you couldn't just hammer through. You really had to... It was like a multiple choice test to choose your own adventure, winding, and you could very easily get out-talked and outsmarted. And it never felt arbitrary. It felt like there was real information in there to learn about the different characters they were dealing with. It was such a brilliant way of handling an RPG, using RPG mechanics, but just turning it on its head and finally doing something different other than, you know, fighting fantasy creatures and getting swords and armor. And that lonely, what was that, a French horn? Some kind of horn It's just so gorgeous. Let's see if we can find that. Alright, this is the one with the horn, but this is a great little theme. There's so much hope here. Even though your guy is just a blurry, disgusting mess. A sad sack of embarrassed excuses. Now I gotta find the horn. Instrument of Surrender. I'm gonna guess it's a French horn with a bunch of delay on it. Perfectly done. Gorgeous. I would have streamed more of Disco Elysium, but it's just too much reading. I don't like reading in games that I'm streaming. I'm happy to read them on my own. I can read way quicker. And I think that they've gone back and voiced a lot of the dialogue in this game in the enhanced edition, so I'm gonna check that out. I'll do my usual thing of see if it's on Switch, and then see if the Switch version is not so terrible that I feel like I really need to actually play it on something more powerful. Disco Elysium, a game that keeps popping up each year, and will probably pop up again in the next year. Then I talked to this fella, Golf Alpha Bravo. We were doing a few music interviews. He had put out an LP called the Sundog LP, and he really wanted to talk about ideas in video games. He wanted to talk about finding zen in video games. And he's an interesting guy to talk to. I don't think I'm a really great interviewer, but or that we had like a lot of chemistry or anything. But he was a deep thinker, and if finding zen in the virtual space sounds interesting to you, then check it out. And also, if you like sort of like psychedelic rock, check out the Sundog LP. It's really good. Then I got really into Morrowind. Ooh, I like how I did my background there. It's very Morrowindy looking. I look like an RPG character, don't I? I look like a bard. An older bard past his prime. I look like the evil government worker that's been accepting bribes. He needs to be put down. Or I look like somebody whose wife got murdered by a goblin and is asking for help, but can't help himself. That's what I look like, all right. Morrowind, another game that I really love playing and streaming for a bit, and then after a while, I don't like reading a bunch of it. But it's just such a damn good game. The world is so incredible to slowly explore, and the way the systems all work together, it's so cool. I wonder if they'll ever go back to try to capture what was so good about Morrowind with the next Elder Scrolls. I feel like they're always chasing Skyrim, and in a way, that's been their most popular one, so I don't blame them, but guys like me and this guy below, we like that Morrowind vibe, and I'm sure Chris does too. One of the games of the year last year, Hades. Normally when I hear the term roguelite, I get really angry. Not angry, just really disinterested. I go, I think I'd rather play something that's more, that feels like it had more effort, not effort put into it, that feels like it had a more linear, straight path. But what Hades does so well is that every time you die, you go back to the little boss, your main room, not your boss room. You go back to this room. I'm sure I'm going to die pretty soon coming up here. And you unlock more and more story from characters. But the way you do that is by handing in different items and choosing who you want to give the gifts to. So you not only get to make meaningful choices, but you're advancing things along so that each time you die, you're actually kind of excited because you can take all the stuff that you found and spend it somewhere and improve that area and find out more of the story. So even though I never beat this game, I still felt like I was immersed in the story of it, and that I still had a great experience with it. And it feels really good to play. It's another one of those games where you could just like put on with a podcast and
Wednesday to Sunday, but it's
just kind of like grind your way through and see how far you can get, and then maybe pause the podcast when you want to see the stories. I think this is a time when I was probably having like big struggles with the internet, which is something that's been bothering me for years, but here really was not. Did I say here was not? Now is not. And then I just realized, okay, you just got to make videos. That's all you got to do, buddy. More RPGs. Still in January. Look at this. I'm playing Divinity Original Sin 2. I own this on the Switch, on PC, and PS4. This looks like I was trying to play it on the Switch, and the details just so low in a game that is already kind of like blurry a bit, just because of the view they choose and how they chose to make the game look visually. So I just really enjoyed this a lot more on the PS4, and it's a game that I still always want to get back to. And look, we have old Ink of the Dragon talking to me in the chat, my best friend, and he loves this game, and he's been a big proponent of it for me. And it's just, what I love about Divinity is that every time I play it, I discover something really interesting. I find something that's maybe funny, or a challenging battle, or a mystery, or a puzzle, and every point you get is so unbelievably important to buff up your character and give them a chance to do more abilities. And then also having the ability to go to this magic mirror and completely change your attributes and skills. All RPGs should let you do that, because you don't even know what you want to be. You don't even know how you're going to want to play until you actually start playing the game. So a killer game that I still need to go back to and finish. God damn it! This is when I realized it's actually kind of fun to organize your games. I'm usually just been be as digital as possible with games, or I buy them and I sell them. Actually, no, not digital as possible. Maybe with multiplayer games, physical as possible, but always selling them. And then I finally got this little black shelf unit and started stacking them. I didn't realize, should you put them horizontally or vertically? It felt like horizontally means I can actually read it, and it took me a while to realize why you need to do that, because if you ever need to move anything, then you are going to have to, like, if you want to get something out of the middle, you got to lift up like 10 cases and take one out and slip it out, and it's like Jenga. You might as well build a big stupid tower. Then I was realizing that every single one of my Switch games was in the wrong case. Balan Wonderworld. Remember that they put out a demo for this game? That was a really, really bad idea, because you could have sold this game just on Yuji Naka's name. Well, now you can't. Yuji Naka's name, the way the cutscenes look. It's a nice looking game. And, people who like anime characters with humongous eyes. The demo was the worst thing you could do, because it exposed what it was terrible at, which was actually playing it and how shallow it was. And it's a one-button game, and there's all these different abilities, but it was just a lot of quantity and not a lot of actual quality in terms of how fun it is to do simple, moment-to-moment things. Balan Wonderworld, rest in peace. Another Mario game. Well, an expansion to a Mario game. An add-on to Super Mario 3D World, which is a killer game on the Wii U, and they also have an expensive port on the Switch. Bowser's Fury is that expensive port with another game. Bowser's Fury was pretty fun. It was open world. It was sort of like the small fun courses of Mario 64, but done in an open area with Bowser coming in and out of it. It was really good. It was a nice little experiment. It was just another way to figure out what these Mario courses, like, what do you want Mario 3D games to be? Do you want it to be, with Mario 64, it was open, but they were limited in what they could do, right? So there was sort of like only so many ways you could interact with the environment. It was usually go up to the top of the hill and then come back down from the top of the hill. And whether that's going up there to beat somebody up or to grab an item. And then Mario Galaxy, that was really nice too, because it was a bit more focused, and it was more about using 3D and 360 degrees, being upside down, using more physics. Mario Sunshine sort of expanded on Mario 64, but I think I've always been more of a fan when it's a bit more focused and linear, like Odyssey. Actually, Odyssey's quite open too. Odyssey's more about experimenting, but just has such great platforming. I love that, even though it seems like Nintendo only makes the same 6 games, and that they rest on it, they do tend to experiment with it, and they play around with it quite a bit. And this was a really nice iteration on that, and it was a pretty nice surprise. This is also when I thought, hey, I'll just put videos out in 15-minute digestible chunks. That was the biggest pain in the ass, because I had to write the titles 4 more times or 6 more times, and I had to come up with more thumbnails and tagging, and it just took me hours to do with very little to show for it. So now I'm back to just dumping them in as big giant 2-hour movies of gameplay. Oh man, this was so fun. Having everybody vote in and rank their official ranking, everybody's ranking of the Final Fantasy franchise, and then calibrating all those votes and coming up with our own list based on what everybody thought, and getting a list that was truly unique to our group, and especially with the characters we've got. But really, it's like some of the choices people made were definitely off the beaten path, and it was so much fun. I want to do more like this. Grand Theft Auto would be fun to do next, and then after that we can branch out and do things like most interesting, your favorite moments, which is going to be hard to rank, favorite cutscenes, characters, character design, that kind of shit. But this one was so fun. It was a lot of work. There's so many games. This one and the Zelda one, and like tabulating them all up was, it's so many crazy notepads written out. I remember sitting in bed. I know exactly where our bed was because Stella likes to change our bedroom around a lot. It's been in like 8 different configurations in the last few years, but I remember where our bed was, how comfortable it was, and all my crazy notepads and writing and like tabulating it up, and it taking a long time, tabulating it up again and getting a different result, which means you need to tabulate it up again, and hopefully you get at least a same result to one of those. But it was a lot of fun, even if I don't make it sound like it was. Then we played some Xenogears, which is such a cool looking game, where Final Fantasy VII put 3D polygonal characters in beautiful 2D pre-rendered backgrounds. Xenogears did the opposite. It had 2D sprites that had this crazy sort of scaling with 3D backgrounds. So it gave you more control of the camera, and it made it seem like you were in these bigger places. Oh, and then also having these like really cool 2-dimensional animations. So it's, there's like pros and cons to them both. I've heard that the second half of Xenogears feels like it's really rushed. So I only really got to about the first quarter, and then I thought I needed to change it over to a different emulator so I could go through it quicker, because it's a huge game, and I just think every old RPG, you really need a speed up button. You might even be using a speed up button right now to get through this video. I do that all the time on YouTube videos. No shame in that. We got to get back to Xenogears, but we need to do it properly. Why do I look so yellow? This was us ranking the Metal Gear Solid franchise. After how gigantic it was to rank Zelda, the entire Zelda franchise, and Final Fantasy, this one was shockingly short. This is a 28-minute episode, but a lot of fun because the games are so different, and there's such different parts of Kojima's career, and each of them did something really stunning. I mean, Metal Gear Solid 1 creating and mastering a new genre, Metal Gear Solid 2 interacting with gamers' expectations as part of the mechanics of the storytelling, 3 just being a bigger and more polished version of those, and then 4 being the whole enchilada, and having the crazy commercials in the beginning where you can actually flip through the channels. It really feels like you're in that futuristic world. But yeah, I look very yellow here. This is, again, me probably trying to figure out my camera and the color temperature settings. Or maybe I had jaundice. Poor guy. Maybe that headband's on too tight. Maybe I got bit by a zombie a mile back. As I said, we ranked Zelda. For a very low-effort background, I think that this background fits really well for it, so I'm proud of that. Zelda was really fun to rank because I downloaded a million ROMs for all the handheld versions and just quickly played through, tried to play about, like half an hour of as many as I could just to see each little gimmick. And man, if you are into the Zelda format, you are so lucky. There's so many fucking Zelda games to play with so many different gimmicks and so much great music. And they're all, even the worst ones are super solid. And at their best are some of the best games ever. Our most viewed video of the year. I know you're thinking, what, 90 views? No, this one has 11,000. This is the CRPG Buyer's Guide, top 5 which CRPGs for you. I had my best buddy, Ink, come on. And he listed his top 5 CRPG games, a genre he's been obsessed with for a few years now. And he also Picked out ones that, if you're a hardcore fan, this is the one you should go for. Although if you're hardcore, you're probably not looking for advice. If you're in for something more simplistic, if you want something funnier, something more serious. And then in between that, I also knocked out a few that I'd played and that I felt like talking about or recommending. Especially good old Shadowrun Dragon something. Not Shadowrun Returns, which is okay. The one with Dragon in the title is incredible. And then the Hong Kong one, the writing just... Dragonfall? Just the Hong Kong one, the writing falls off. Maybe I should get back to it and see if the writing... I don't know. See if I can click with it more. Maybe it was a timing thing. Maybe I tried to stream it. I don't know. But I just remember being really disappointed with it. But as far as like a very simplistic, approachable CRPG, the Shadowrun games are good for that. And then Divinity, I think, maybe was the best overall, but you'll have to watch it yourself to find out. Then we played Little Nightmares. A pretty cool game. A stunningly beautiful game. So it reminded me a lot of Inside with the lighting and your little character in this big world. Inside just so much more intense, and Inside is a bloody masterpiece that took, I think, about 7 years of artisanal work. Little Nightmares, still a stunning effort, but even though it's easy to compare them by looking at them, it's kind of unfair to compare them. Little Nightmares still really, really solid game that was a lot of fun and had some interesting moments, but will always be a number 2 to Inside. And there's also Little Nightmares 2, so who knows? Maybe that one's even better. Like a Limbo game, the first Inside, or Another World, especially with that little long, tubey, black, snaky thing. It reminds me of the first time you die in Another World. It was pretty fun. Although I haven't played 2. I don't know, it's those games where you're not that excited to play, but you're glad you play it, and there are some moments. It seemed like more people in the chat wanted me to play this than I think I personally wanted to play it, but I still enjoyed it. Like an arranged marriage. We ranked the Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro games. That was a lot of fun too. I feel like I did a good job in the background. Sekiro number 1 for me. What's a recency bias? Oh my god, then we played Final Fantasy fucking 9. A game that I had a lot of fun playing on the Vita, and then just kind of dropped off as I got near the end. Coming back to it, I felt like it wasn't going to have the same kind of emotional impact as, say, Final Fantasy 7 had, or even the best moments in 8 or 10 or 13. But it really did. And it surprised me by how funny it was, and really how many great moments were there, and even actually how, once you get over the weirdness of the ending, introducing new villains and stuff, how incredible the ending turns out to be. And actually, I ended up finding a really, really good mod. It was the Moguri Mod, I think it's called. So this is it here. Just beautiful. I think it uses AI to upscale the pre-rendered backgrounds, which is the big weakness when you're playing the PC to PS4 port of Final Fantasy VII. Is that you get these really blurry old pre-rendered backgrounds that look even worse when all the characters are made to look a lot better. Final Fantasy IX, so good. I actually did a big review on it that took me a lot of time. That was in the phase of the year where I wanted to do reviews. I did one for Final Fantasy IX and as well as for Final Fantasy VII Remake, and why I personally didn't think it was a good remake of Final Fantasy VII. I also got a PS5, looks like in March, and I played Demon Souls, which is a very difficult game, and is still a very difficult game. And kicked my ass, and the same thing happened. I think I got a little further in this one than I did when I tried to play it on PS3 twice. A beautiful game, but still fucking difficult. The levels are so goddamn long, but it's just got so much killer atmosphere. And I love how the bosses feel more like puzzles, as Prince would put it, rather than just it seems like all the bosses in like Dark Souls and Bloodborne and Sekiro are all pretty much the same. Whereas Demon's Souls, there's something about them that you need to exploit, which is a bit more RPG-ish in a way. Outriders is a game that I grabbed because I was looking for anything that would be kind of next-gen-y for my PS5. I was like Forrest Gump in that way. I thought it would be next-gen-y, but it wasn't. It was a game that was also available on the previous gen. What a bummer. A strange game. Kind of, the story felt sort of really clumsily told. And the combat was, pretty predictable, but it was super solid. And some of the abilities were really fun. I like that a lot of the abilities in it felt like you needed to be sort of aggressive to get your health back and use the abilities to get your health back. And you could, it had an interesting gimmick where you could change the difficulty of the world, like a tendency meter. Anyways, you could make it more difficult or less difficult, and then that would change the kind of loot that you get. And I think they were trying to make it Destiny. And they ended up just making a more like a Gears of War. I know Colin Moriarty of Sacred Symbols is a huge fan of this. I thought it was pretty silly, but overall, it was a solid time, a solid shooter. Every once in a while, I get into Rocket League, and for some reason, on my PS5, I guess I was looking for stuff to play, and I got back into Rocket League. Maybe it's because it just loaded I think it's because it loaded so fast. That was one of the really impressive things. And maybe it didn't load faster at all. But I kind of wish there was a Rocket League where you didn't have to learn how to do all the flying, because that part just seems so beyond me. If you just had to stick around on the ground or do jumps and stuff, that's more where my skill level's at. But that's the cool thing it's so easy for anyone to play Rocket League because I believe that it's free. So you can easily get anyone to play it because it's free. And also, it's overall pretty simple. It's the one of the greatest examples of have simple controls but allow the combinations of those to be very deep. Depth through simplicity. Rocket League. Man. So I was looking for another reason to play a game on the PS5, and I went with Spider-Man Miles Morales, which really blew me away. As I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of times I was getting a bit disillusioned with big AAA third-person titles like God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, that kind of stuff. Just wasn't really grabbing me. But Spider-Man was really an exception, and I would later find out it's because I actually really just love Insomniac. Later on in this year, I got so into Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, I got to review it. That was a true PS5 game. A 10 out of 10 the first time you play it. And it goes down to about an 8 or a 7 or a 6 when it comes time to actually like 100%ing it or doing all the side stuff. But that first run through, magnifique. And I was learning that in this game, just loving what Insomniac does with their traversal, their pacing, their combat. Really makes me excited to play Sunset Overdrive, which I can play on my Xbox Series S that I just got on Game Pass for free. Resident Evil Village came out this year in 2021, so I went back and played Resident Evil 7, which was a lot of fun actually. Really, really nicely paced. The first part is so terrifying. Going into a house full of crazy murderers who have kidnapped your wife is terrifying. As you start learning more about them and it becomes more kind of fantastical, for some reason that felt a lot less scary to me. It's way scarier to be kidnapped and tortured and raped by creeps in a place where, in a house that is rotting. And then when it becomes like black sludgy monsters, it's not as interesting to me. But I thought the first bit of this was pretty cool, and there were some like show-stopping moments with chainsaws and cars, moments in boss battles where I thought, I cannot believe this is happening, but it still is executed so well, feels so good. So yeah, I'd say the first half of this game, fantastic, and more or less sticks the landing. I like this a lot more than Resident Evil Village, that's for sure. Yeah, chainsaw. Me and Matt got more into reviewing movies. We've been working on reviewing all the MCU movies, and the new Mortal Kombat movie came out, so we watched the original. That was a lot of fun. I had these old retro TV sets. I thought that looked kind of cool. Do they? I don't know. I'm not a graphic design guy, but as you can clearly see. But I thought it kind of worked. Always fun to talk movies with Matt. Always fun to go back and check out these old films. I love movie criticism and game criticism. And the nice thing about movies is that you can review it in, like, you can watch it in 2 hours, you know? Video games can take 40 hours to play. And a lot of times it feels like you don't have the authority to speak about a game because, you know, you've only played 30 hours of it. And movies? Just lay back, relax, let Sub-Zero and Scorpion come all over you, come over here, and enjoy. I was buying a lot of physical games because I spent the extra money on getting a disc version of the PS5 so I could buy games, and EB Games near me was having something like you always got $50 back if you returned it within the first month, if you traded it in. And if you did it within 7 days, they'd give you all your money back, which I didn't really feel right doing more than a handful of times. But Nier was one that I think I bought it digitally because they were sold out or something. Yeah, because I guess it wasn't as anticipated enough games to just send enough copies. It was sort of that sweet spot, well, the terrible spot, a horribly sour, bitter, uncooked spot of Square not thinking it's popular enough to send out enough copies, but it actually being popular enough that a bunch of people bought it. In April 23rd, snapping up a new game. These Nier games, I think they're better off for me just watching them as a movie and listening to the music. Because the combat is always pretty tedious. And the music is good, but it's usually just one song or two. Especially in this game, felt like it only had one song. And then the game reveals itself as you go, you know, layer upon layer. I got to the part that was like a new section for this game. For this is a remake of, I don't know, Drakengard. I think it's a remake of Drake. No, it's not a remake of Drakengard. It's a remake of Nier, which is in the Drakengard franchise. Yeah, that makes sense. Anyways, there are some weird parts of like young girls being giant monsters and some guy saying he loved her, and I just, after a while, I didn't want to participate in this weird stuff to me that felt icky. Here's a next-gen game for you. I think no game so far has done a better job of utilizing the PS5 controller, the DualSense vibrations. This game was quite cool to jump into. You know, just to explore these worlds the first few times, to figure out the challenge of the game and just like the hard-hitting action of it. It's a game that I was, you know, liked and then loved and then kind of hated and then went back and forth on over and over again. There's some like big difficulty ramp-ups, and because it's a roguelike, you need to slow down and just like put the work in to try to get the upgrades and try to find the right upgrades and whatever you're going to get on that run. And I really constantly was wishing with this game that it was like a 12 to 15 hour linear tailored challenge, because I really like the worlds that they created and the enemies and the combat. But I guess the whole point about it is that your character keeps coming back. But did that need to be done in a roguelike way? I mean, almost every single video game has fail states and deaths where your character comes back. I don't think that it needed to be a roguelike to do that. I think it was just an idea that they glommed onto and stuck with, to the detriment of me and other players like me that didn't quite enjoy that, and it kind of prevented us from playing it further. Might be interesting to jump back into it and see if the muscle memory's still there and see See how far I can get. Or I wonder if they've like tuned it up at all and maybe made a few things smoother. Maybe not though. I think this game really likes that it's difficult. I love how the guns felt. And the feedback of everything was done so well. It was so polished. Can't go in the water. Not yet. It's Metroidy. Oh yeah, then we played Resident Evil Village, which is a game that definitely felt like it started off as a Resident Evil Revelations game and then was turned into a new Resident Evil game. Which I thought it had its moments. Probably the opening was really strong. The castle moments were really strong. All the different areas felt like they were sort of from different games in a way. I mean, sometimes it felt like you had as much guns and ammo like you're playing a fucking Call of Duty game, and then other times it was like this tight, limited inventory survival horror. So sort of all over the place. The pacing was a bit weird too. You really had to be mindful of your own pacing throughout. But, you know, like a decent survival horror game that I personally thought was really overrated. By probably like preteens who have mommy complexes. Me and Matt reviewed Love, Death, and Robots. This is a series that I probably never would have watched if Matt hadn't brought it up, and had some really stunning moments and a lot of short episodes. This was a lot of fun. I really recommend the series. It's on Netflix. Or just watch our review. I spoke with alumni of the 90s Kid channel. He used to be a writer for a 90s Kid. Matthew Hayes, he now works for Ubisoft. I think he does something to do with HR. I don't know. Something like that. He works for Ubisoft. At the end of games, he's in the credits. How cool is that? But we got together and had a little reunion chat about Returnal and bitched about it. I called this video Returnal Review. I wish it wasn't a roguelike. Me and Horky talking about the question, should reviewers beat games? This is a fun little chat. Every once in a while, me and Horky get together and have a chat like this. And this one I really, really enjoyed. Look, I used to have these really cool, very discreet in-ear monitors that sort of look like hearing aids. I don't have those anymore because I broke them. I think I rolled over them with my computer chair. They were kind of uncomfortable anyway. For a small amount of time, I think I got decent at making thumbnails. As you can see in this little Horky one. Maybe this Resident Evil Village. I think Leonot made that one. Maybe I didn't get good. I just started putting titles over them. That's what I did. I think probably back here I was spending more time on the thumbnails learning. Yeah, right around here. Looks like really the most eye-catching thing to do is just have big letters. That's probably the best way to do it. And a big picture. Just a big picture of a character. I don't know why YouTube's editing software doesn't have a thumbnail maker. You can pick, it'll offer you 3 choices from the video, and they generally try to find big faces for you to use. But yeah, it'd be nice. Yeah, it was a fun little experiment. It's just a lot of work. And I'd rather be playing games or talking about games than making thumbnails. This was the first year that I really played banjo. I started with Grunty's Revenge, which was an interesting break into it, but really not the banjo experience. The real banjo experience is N64. Or if I would have had an Xbox Series S by that time, which is how I should have done it, I could have probably played a much better backwards compatible version. Instead, I ended up playing like an emulated version of the N64 one, which was pretty good for like save states and stuff, because these older games can be kind of cruel and they can be a little bit unforgiving, and that really helped. This game was a lot of fun. It's definitely not Mario. It's different in that way, but the puzzles can be really interesting. It's quite enjoyable. Just like the size of these levels and the detail of them is pretty incredible. Great music, pretty fun characters, a overall pretty funny game. And just if you love exploring 3D environments, if that's the part you really liked out of a 3D platformer, probably one of the best of all time, considering its age and all that. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with Banjo. I think I went through an arc where I started off thinking this is okay, then this is good. I think there's a part where I was really, really into it and then a bit kind of off with it. But as you're like plowing your way through, there's going to be these ups and downs. And overall, I'm really glad that I played it. Especially that final level where you have the different seasons and that changes that level from like spring, summer, fall, winter. And you're doing things in spring that are going to affect how they are in the winter. That was pretty brilliant and must have been just mind-blowing at the time. Biomutant came out. Like Cyberpunk, this is a game that was far too ambitious for the size of the team and the resources that they had. You know, it wants to be Breath of the Wild, and it wants to have like super slick visuals, be a shooter, and have kung fu combat and gliding and a big open world and branching storylines. It also went with a strange decision to have a narrator describe what people are saying. So the animals are talking to each other in their own language. The narrator is not translating it word for word. They're saying, he seems to be rather annoyed as he describes to you the way a narrator is speaking. And that could be very grating to listen to for many, many, many hours. I think Jace was playing it on his I Break for Bunnies channel, and I think ran into like some crazy game-breaking bugs or something, or losing progress, not able to finish. Jace tends to have bad luck that way with games like this. This was super disappointing because I really wanted to like it. I think maybe if they just said no guns, let's just make the Kung Fu combat really, really good, and maybe made it a bit smaller, I think it would have been a lot smarter. And we reviewed Army of Dead. The Dead. Zack Snyder had such a big year. God, they look like drawings. They look like a drawing. Zack Snyder was just so on fire with the Justice League Snyder cut that, you know, they asked him, "You got anything else? We'll take anything. Here's an old idea." This movie was okay. The best thing about this movie was the opening montage. That was really, really good. So I'd recommend checking out the opening montage to Army of the Dead and our review. This is one of my favorite titles for a video. Biomutant. We have Breath of the Wild at home. And this is Breath of the Wild at home. Some more Banjo-Kazooie. Ratchet and Clank, man. So playing Miles Morales and really falling in love with what Insomniac was doing. Getting a review code for Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart was good because I played Ratchet and Clank on the PS4 and wasn't really that into it. I felt like it was kind of soulless. And when you go back and look at how Ratchet and Clank was on PS2, which I had never played, but watching people who were really familiar with that and the way that they just like neutered the personality and, well, totally changed the personality, the vibe and the tone of the PS2 Ratchet and Clank, which is more adult themed or more mature and more nuanced, had more depth. And the way they kind of changed Ratchet from this more like a roguish character and just like a smiling, bland, kid-friendly character. They always make the mistake of thinking that kids can only like things that are stupid. When they are so into this stuff and they're so ready to soak up everything you can throw at them, that, you know, don't be afraid of like scaring kids or overwhelming them. It's they can handle a lot with this kind of shit. Anyways, like I said before, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, the first playthrough of it is an actual, all those overused terms, it is an actual thrill ride. There's so many moments I couldn't believe we're in a game. It looked, everything about it, so polished, detailed, the visuals, the pacing, the set pieces. This is just the opening. I'm not showing you anything interesting about it. But it is a 10 out of 10 if you just play it once through. I'd love to go back and play the original PS2 ones and see see kind of what I was missing back then and see how different it is back then too. I'm thinking it'll be pretty similar to when I watched the Ghost in the Shell reboot first and then went back and watched the anime and realized, oh, I see. Yeah, the reboot really didn't understand anything about the original. E3, not as big of a deal as it used to be. Here's the Summer Game Fest. Oh yeah, remember when these guys came out and said they are a new studio? And they didn't have a game to talk about or anything to really advertise. Just these guys coming out and saying, we have a studio. We're going to make a game. We're going to make games. Announcement. A Nintendo Direct. Oh yeah, there's going to be some weird Donkey Konga beat-em-up game. That look like it could be pretty interesting. We watched Luca. Some more movie reviews. Oh yeah, this is the video that took me by far the longest to do. The Final Fantasy VII. Why Final Fantasy VII Remake doesn't feel like Final Fantasy VII. Please watch this if you haven't already. It took me a long time to make, and I was quite proud of it. With all the different musical edits, the timing, the jokes, the ending. And I feel like, even though I was just trying to have fun and shit on Nomura, I think I actually learned something about Final Fantasy VII Remake that I'd never considered before. Clickbait. And then I was kind of on a roll with that stuff, so I did another very time-consuming, time-intensive review on Final Fantasy IX, since I had such a great time with that one. Mario Golf Super Rush. Man, I was excited for a new Nintendo game, a golf game, and I really actually liked the multiplayer Rush style that they did this, which makes it sound like this should be a 9 out of 10. It should be an A game, but it turned out to be really annoying and tedious in some parts, like trying to get your ball up these mountains and dealing with the hills. It ended up being just a lot less fun than it really should have been. And getting here like that is never fun. Yeah, this game ended up being super disappointing, where I felt like I'd kind of exhausted all the fun in just a few days. Maybe if I was still at a phase where I was playing more of these games with friends. It just seems like something I don't do anymore. Maybe I don't have any more friends, or at least I don't have friends that play games. Or just games become more insular. I don't know. I say that, and then I immediately am thinking of like League of Legends, Destiny, Dota, Valorant, Apex Legends, all these huge games that are multiplayer. But it just seems like at one point I was playing a shitload of games with my friends, and now I don't. But this had some really cool ideas. I think it felt too expensive for what it was. I got to do a little preview of a game, played the first level of this one, Death's Door. Man, this thing looked great ambiance, controlled really, really well. Very, not a really nice level of challenge where it's not super frustrating. You're never thinking like, how am I going to get past this boss? At least in the parts that I played. And had this sort of like weird, like noir feel to it. I say noir because it's in black and white, but it did have a kind of a noir, mysterious feel to it. I only just played the preview, but I really liked it. It felt really good. Great game feel. I got my first and last platinum trophy with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. This is where the game went from a 10 to like an 8 or a 7. Hunting down the game is so good when you're just going straight through it like a roller coaster, like a haunted house. But when you stop and start digging into the little nooks and crannies and stuff, it's sort of like if you're playing Mario Kart or Diddy Kong Racing, it looks great, right? But if you stop and start racing around, you see where the cracks are. And the game just really isn't set up to explore because of the way your character interacts with different platforms and buildings, and you think you need to get to the top of the building, but there's not really a clear path to get on top of it, and it can be really clunky jumping around. But still a 10 out of 10 the first time through. We watched Point Break for the first time. Hell of a movie. Watch the review, please. Look how sweaty I am. This must be in the summer. July 16th, baby! Went back to Skyward Sword, the remaster. What, did the remaster come out on the Switch? Yeah, I think I tried playing with the like motion controls for a good chunk of it. It's so interesting because there's all these things in here that seem like they could be from Breath of the Wild, like the endurance, the stamina bar and stuff, but just done so clunky. This game was so fucking... The pacing of this is a game where you really got to play at your own pace and stop when you are bored and need to stop. Because usually in Zelda games, the part leading up to a dungeon does not feel like a dungeon, because dungeons are long, lots of puzzles. They're sort of like mentally taxing, you know, and it's when you get out of a dungeon, it's like, fresh air. I want to explore. I want to do funny things. I want to collect chickens. I want to talk to funny characters and ride a horse, you know, or go fishing. But this game, what it would do is it would, like, the area walking up towards the dungeon would be like a dungeon. So you'd be doing all these crazy puzzles, and it was so you'd be already kind of like mentally drained, and then you'd get to a dungeon. And you think, oh, fuck, I need to spend like another 2 hours underground solving puzzles. Metal Gear Solid 4 had that problem too, where it would have a really long briefing of cutscenes in the beginning of an episode and at the end. So if you did the beginning, then played the chapter, and then watched the ending cutscene, you should stop. Super Bunny Hop pointed this out. But if you kept going, then you would have back-to-back ending cutscene and then the first cutscene to the next episode. So yeah, this game really benefits from going at your own pace and knowing when you're bored and you need to stop. And that could be my fault too, because I can tend to I feel like I'm streaming, I need to do it for 2 hours. So that can be, I can kind of force myself into weird situations, and that's my fault. There were still a lot of really cool things in this game. Obviously the music, some interesting visuals. Really good story. Really good story. I actually cared about it. And the way Zelda and Link interact I really liked, and the different characters that he runs into was done really, really nicely. Alright. Oh, now, because I liked Insomniac so much, we played a bit of Spyro, the remaster of Spyro. Really beautiful remaster. One of the best remaster... Actually, I think this is like a remake, because this is originally a PS1 game. One of the greatest remakes in terms of actually staying true to what the original was trying to do. So many... Like, I was checking out the Halo Master Chief Collection, even Demon Souls, and they make these changes where, like, Demon Souls, they change the expression of the NPCs, the villains, like making them angry or sad, you know, or like trying to be scary, or when they're supposed to be scared themselves. These are arbitrary. I'm just making these up, but you know what I mean. The Halo Master Chief Collection is so bright everywhere. It's like, okay, I was bringing some lights. This place is a little dingy. Where, you know, maybe it's supposed to be dark and oppressive as you're fighting aliens and trying to make it seem like it's always darkest before it's dawn. Anyway, Spyro was a lot of fun. It was a really interesting game because it was like the main gameplay loop was finding ways to float, because everything was jumping in a long float. It was a very like kind of passive game. Very nice game to chill out to. Very good podcast game. Beautiful music. Some sexy dragons. Hypnospace Outlaw is a game that Horky had recommended, and a game that, if you don't know, it's a 1990s nostalgic internet simulator where you play a detective that is enforcing a very 1990s internet, and it has great music and visuals, funny writing. I really, really clicked at this once I started playing it on my Switch, because on the Switch, you can actually touch the screen, so it's really easy to move around. And you can just kind of play it in bed at the end of the day when you just kind of want to mindlessly browse the internet, but you're mindlessly browsing this internet, which is really cool and pretty funny. And there's some like interesting like puzzles to figure out. So if you're a fan of like 90s kind of adventure point and click games, but that are done, I guess it's almost like a text-based adventure puzzle game, but then with crazy stuff like this that is not only like calls back to that time, but then kind of explores in different ways. It's almost like a satire of that time as well. It's really, really fun, and I really recommend it on a PC or a Switch, where you can play with a mouse or, touching. It's playable on a PS4, but or like I'm doing here with the Switch and the sticks, but it is just a million times better played the way you would have explored the internet back then. Hypno Space Outlaw. Then I went to Ocarina of Time. Still really, really fun game. And then I ended up going on a vacation and didn't end up finishing it. Got distracted. This guy just called me cringe. Big Daddy Rock Saitama. Fuck. I hate how much that shit bothers me. I'm glad that I had forgotten about it until now. Anyways, Ocarina of Time, still got to get back to that. Still a great game. One of my best gaming experiences. I'm of that age where this came out in 1998, so I would have been 14 years old. The N64 would have been very new. It was quite mind-blowing back then. And luckily, fortunately, it still holds up pretty well. Man, I look so dirty. What is wrong with me? The hell? This is in August. I was probably out sweating all day, like working in the fields, helping Stella with her camp and stuff. I'm still figuring out my lighting or something back then. I look like a dirty mess. Enjoying some Zelda. This is one of the vacation videos where I did top 10 Silent Hill music. Pretty cool video. Check it out. Deathloop. Man, I was so hyped for this because I love Arcane with Prey, Dishonored. And this was just fine. This was pretty good. But I had really high hopes for it, and I think the AI is what really let it down. It was a cool enough concept going through the levels and having them be at different times of the day, which kind of walked a very thin line of sometimes being too tedious, but other times letting you explore an interesting time-based puzzle. It wasn't really a puzzle. You just do what the game tells you, and your in-game character figures out the puzzle. You never really figure out any kind of a puzzle. The idea that you need to figure out how you can kill the 8 different enemy visionaries, the little mini-bosses, all in one run, it never feels like you're playing a roguelite. It feels like you are playing a linear game where your character is figuring all that out, which is totally fine by me. I think I was saying that about Returnal and other roguelike games, that I wish they were more linear. Just what I wish this game had was, I think the AI needed to be a lot better, and I think there needed to be more enemy variety. Kind of felt like the enemies you dealt with were always the same. They were always the same size. They kind of acted the same way. They used the same weapons. Said the same things. And because you were going back to the same areas all the time, the same time periods, it got even more repetitive. So I think that's where it needed more variety in the challenge. This is, in 2021, September 19th, this is a very old game style. I mean, Dishonored was really cool when it came out on the PS3, and BioShock before that on the 360. Which this game is like a spiritual successor of. But yeah, I think you needed to add a bit more. And they did in the overall concept, but where the overall concept got really deep, it's like they just left behind the basics of it, where the enemy AI and that needs to be good. And it was pretty disappointing. But it was fun to go around and kick people, as referenced in the Genius Donkeys video. I played Silent Hill for the first time. It was really good. I really liked the psychological thrills of it. The music, of course. The grungy, dirty horror ambiance. It was pretty scary going into the school and exploring these different areas. I really, really liked the puzzles, too. I think I enjoyed Silent Hill 1 more than 2. 2 was obviously had the improvements of being on a PS2 and just the improvements of being their second go around at it. But I think in terms of overall, just kind of execution, good God, does this game look old? But it works because it's a dark, grungy, dirty horror game. This just looked like you were watching an old kind of VHS. It looked like your friend had, taped a VHS movie that you were not supposed to be watching. And it was just it was really, really nice. Surprisingly low amount of jump scares for a scary game. It was more like a deep, heavy, psychological, like oppressive thrill ride. Metroid Dread. Well, we got some more games to play at the end of the year. I'd never beaten a Metroid game until this one. I really, really like this one. Probably one of my favorite games of the year, right up there with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Probably number 2. This game felt damn good. This game felt like it had learned a lot from watching games inspired by Metroidvania. I felt like a lot of what I loved about Hollow Knight in the way the Hollow Knight character moves, the agility, the countering, the attacks. It's even like when you see the way the screen kind of shakes and the timing of it and the movement, the rhythm of those counters and the melee attacks. That felt very Hollow Knight. Just felt great. This game was done so well in terms of like pacing. I think it hardly ever felt tedious. There were a lot of interesting different challenges you could do. This is the time of year when I had gotten LED lights that I could control with my phone, so I decided to go all blue or all red, which was pretty cool for certain games. I think overall, just like a lot of white light or yellowish light is nice, but that was a fun little moment. I also brought up a big ass puffy leather chair, which is nice sometimes. You got to keep it original. No, not original. You just got to keep it fresh. You got to keep changing it up. Definitely not original. Nothing I do is. But this Metroid game, even though it's so many years on in the Metroid franchise, did find some original things to do. And it was great. For me, the best Metroid game ever. Because it's the one that I played all the way through and really, really enjoyed the whole time. It just did a lot more things that I was interested in. Way to go, Nintendo. You did it. Silent Hill 2. Yeah, this was a pretty great game. This is also when I got disco lights. I think I was incorporating all this stuff from my music stream and then seeing what would work on both. So if you wanted to feel like you were at a 1980s nightclub playing a video game with me, now you can. It's interesting, those headphones I have, these like Sony noise cancelling headphones. I use these for so long. They're nice if you want to take a break from hearing everything else. And then I was using these guys, mixing music and stuff, and I'd gotten so used to these ones that when I put those on, I realized, oh my god, I thought I had screwed up my music mix because it was so bassy and muddy. And I realized, no, that's just how those headphones sound. Bassy and muddy. They're great for the noise cancelling. Doesn't really cancel out people's voices though, so if Stella's watching reality shows where people are just obnoxiously talking, it doesn't filter those out, so they're not great for that. But anyways, different headphones are very exciting to me. As Stella had told me, she's never met anyone that's bought as many headphones as me. If I die, that's probably what you put on my tombstone. Put some damn headphones on my tombstone. We reviewed The Evil Dead for Halloween, the 1981 version. My first time watching it. It was really good. Check out the review. We reviewed Dune. Really good. I think I was a bit negative on Dune in this review. And I watched it again with some other people, on a TV with really good sound. And there's so much to love in this movie. I give it A-. Bully. Started playing Bully on the PS2. I love hopping into the world of Bully. I like the music, the atmosphere. Playing it on my PS5, even though it was a PS2 on PS4 port. PS5 finally getting some backwards compatibility for your $700. I like the mini games. I found this game really hilarious. Probably the funniest Rockstar game I've ever played. And I actually wanted to see what happened in the story. I found that the writing was solid and mature, which Rockstar would do really, really well in Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2. And even in GTA 4. Vice, and like a lot of other stuff. I think it's only GTA 5 where the writing gets a little bit silly, but just because GTA 5 feels like it's just trying to be all of the other GTA games that came before it. Anyways, Bully was great. I never finished it, but I would like to. Dead Rising. Probably my favorite game I played last year that was not released in 2021. It was my very first time playing it. I totally fell in love with the gameplay loop, exploring them all, strategizing how to get these, rescue these people. I just love the idea that these people are going to die, and it's up to you to save them, which sounds so stupid, but like so many games, they don't let anyone die. It's all designed for you to do what the game wants you to do, you know, for the game to hold your hand and go, now you're doing this, and you're going to save these people, and now you're going to be the hero here. This game, you actually have to figure that out, and it's very, very, very difficult. And it was a very funny game. The psychopaths were super obnoxious, but pretty funny. And it was just paced so fucking beautifully, where every time you think you've got to figure it out, they add another layer. Finding random weapons to bash over the zombie's head was just endlessly entertaining. God, I love this game so much. Give this game 10 out of 10. Dead Rising 1. The GTA Trilogy Remaster. What a fucking crock of shit this game was. This terrible, disgraceful. How dare they? Look, I don't like going all Angry Joe and ranting about games, but for Rockstar to have been made by Grand Theft Auto and what they did with Grand Theft Auto, they exist and they're a powerhouse because of GTA 3 and this trilogy of Vice City and San Andreas, and then to just let the definitive edition be done by a team that has only really done mobile ports and did not do a great job of those mobile ports. And you let them do your cutting edge next gen console remasters. They're ports, they're terrible ports. And totally change the feel of the games. Change the lighting, the atmosphere. And sure, make it look somewhat smoother and more high res, but completely changing the vibe of the games and ruining them to the point that you would rather play the classic versions, and then going and taking those classic versions out of the world, off the marketplace, so you can't even play them. Like, what a double dick move. And then also PSN not offering any kind of a refund service. Even if they offer just like a 2-day, 2-hour service like Steam had, and even if I was beyond that because I streamed it, I'd feel at least better that, okay, I can't refund it, but I still got something out of it. Because if they had something like that, then I would be a lot more careful with my first 2 hours of playing a game or my first 2 days of having it. And not being able to get a refund on PSN with this game's crashing too. It wasn't just the actual quality of it. It was not running at some points. And then also playing Series Sam 4 on the PS4 and it crashing. And then also playing Dead Rising 2 and it crashing and losing so much progress. That's when I bought an Xbox Series S. Because I thought, I don't want to support PSN anymore. If I'm going to play PlayStation games, I'm going to buy physical games of that I want to run at the highest level, like the brand new cutting edge stuff that I want to be at 4K 60 frames per second. I'll play that on my PS5 physically, and then I'll sell the games or exchange them or trade them or whatever. But I'm never going to buy anything else on PSN unless it's some crazy deal. Like, at least at Dead Rising 2 I only paid $8 for it, but I still feel like I'm not going to play it because it just keeps crashing over and over again. So I keep losing hours of progress. Whereas on the Series S, I could have just played the original Dead Rising 2, backwards compatible, and it would have upscaled it in some way, and it would have been like a remaster, a better remaster. So that was, man, that sucked. That was in November. Hopefully something better happened. I played more Dead Rising. That was good. What a great time I had. Then Dead Rising 2, which I had more problems with, but it did lead me to get an Xbox Series S and really just enjoy the hell out of the Game Pass and the incredible value you get off that. Series Sam 4, play this for our good buddy Dark Horse for Lachlan. A lot of fun. Really funny. Also was crashing. Maybe I'll try it on the Xbox. Maybe it works better there. I think it's available on Game Pass for free. This is like just a fun game to dig around and run around and murder people. And I like how it feels like a puzzle game that you need to figure out, and you have to use a lot of different strategies. You have these like waves, and you're trying to figure out what order to take the enemies out, what different weapons to use, and what order to use them. It was a lot of fun. Series Sam 4. And that brings us to the end of the year. I played a bit of Halo Infinite. I played Flight Simulator. Finally, I've been wanting to play Flight Simulator for so long. I tried playing it on my crappy PC. It just didn't run well at all. Now I can finally play it on Game Pass on my Xbox Series S, and I'm having so much fun. Here's me trying to fly around Toronto and find my house, but I can't locate the big park. Bellwoods Park is huge, but they don't render it very well. So maybe I'm flying over what I think it is. I think what I should do is go on Google Maps and put in like my GPS coordinates and try to plot the GPS coordinates on the map here. It's a hilarious game because Flight Simulator looks so good, but sometimes there's a lot of things in it that are just so clunky. Like you're doing the training missions and you complete one and maybe some of them take 5 minutes, some of them take like 2 minutes, some take 10 minutes, and then you have to back out and then choose another one and then go back into it. Or there's just like really ugly font comes up. There's a lot of weird things in this that you go, God, this feels like almost like a budget game. But then you look at it, and it's obviously not a budget game. I read a review of an actual pilot saying he really enjoyed this, and he said, it feels pretty real. The only thing it didn't is that when you get lower to the ground, there's less wind going over your plane, so you have less control. Because, to control a plane, left or right is all about you're controlling the way the wind is making your plane move. So he said it can feel more mushy, but he really liked it. So that's the great thing about Game Pass is that I didn't have to pay a dime for this. Well, other than the very small fee to play Game Pass per month. And I got to play Halo Infinite. And you just get to try all these games and not worry about them not being good. Like putting your money into... See, if I had been playing this on Game Pass, if I'd bought an Xbox 1 month earlier, or 2 months earlier, I would have played San Andreas, the definitive edition, and realized this fucking sucks. And then I wouldn't have wasted almost $100. That's what it costs in Canada to buy a brand new game. To buy the definitive edition cost me $100. Yeah, that's a piss off. But the Xbox Series S has not been a piss off. Game Pass has been a great value. Flight Simulator was and is super great still. It's really fun to jump into Halo Infinite and see, God, this really, after all these years, it really feels like the first Halo game in kind of some good ways and some bad ways. But I don't have that problem of like, oh, I feel like I have to get my $100 worth. I don't. I need to get $10 a month worth. And I did. So this was a fun year. A lot of great episodes with you guys. And I'm excited to play some more on the Xbox. And go forward and try some more formats out for the channel. Like maybe not do as much gameplay stuff. Maybe do more talking. And more shows with you guys where we're voting and ranking things. So please stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching this. Bye.